Hey, welcome back. We are in Scandalous Grace and we are in chapter 2. I want to pick up where we left off last week. Excuse me. We've been talking about working it out, which is chapter 2, and we're in Ephesians chapter 1. We read our last video, we read verse 3 through 11. I may have just read 9 through 11. I don't remember for sure, but I want to pick up today because I want to deal with the subject here that no matter what your prison is, and we talked about some prison type things in our lives in our last video, no matter what prison you may find yourself in today, God's plan is always more powerful than your prison. So if you haven't gotten my book yet, if you haven't purchased my book, there's a link in the description below. Click that link, it'll take you right to it. I want to jump right in today, Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11. Furthermore, Paul says, furthermore, because we are united with Christ, we have received an inheritance from God. For he chose us in advance. I'm not going to rehash that again, but he chose us in advance, and he makes everything work out according to his plan. So we want to look at his plan today and how his plan, or God's plan, is more powerful than your prison. God has the power. Not only is his plan more powerful, but he has the power to produce his plans and purposes in your life. That is a powerful, powerful thought. I mentioned last week that when Paul wrote the book of Ephesians, that he was actually in prison. The truth, or the facts behind that, is many of Paul's letters were written while he was in prison. We could even say it like this. Most of the time when Paul wrote, he was bound. He was bound in prison. And we often think that perhaps God can't use us. I'm guilty of thinking this thought process. Maybe God can't use me because I have areas that I am bound. Maybe you feel like, well, God can't use me because I struggle with a particular addiction. Maybe, whatever that is, maybe it's a mental addiction, maybe it's a relationship addiction, maybe it's even a substance addiction. And because I have this addiction, God therefore can't use me. It might be, that I struggle. I've got bitterness. Somebody hurt me. Maybe I have issues with my parents or my dad, or a person promised to be faithful to me, but they were unfaithful, and so now I'm bitter and I'm just struggling. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's that whole level of fear and unforgiveness, and we say things like, well, I'll serve once I get rid of my anger problem. And so we constantly are battling these bondages in our life. And so, well, I'll serve when I get rid of my anger problem. But what we don't understand often is, and I say we don't understand, I include myself in that because I get caught up in this. And so what I'm not thinking often is that my anger is just an opportunity to discover God's peace. My lack of generosity, I'll be generous, when I make more money. I'll give more when I have more. And what I don't think about often is that God can turn our shortage, he can turn my shortage into a story of his sufficiency. So this thought process, well, I can't do anything because I'm in bondage to something. Paul wrote most of his epistles while he was in prison. See, God turns our obstacles into opportunities. He turns our past, and I don't know what your past is. Maybe your past, you struggled. Maybe there was some serious things in your life that you struggle with. But God will turn your past into a platform. God uses, here's what I'm trying to say. Here's what I'm saying. God uses opposition to produce opportunity. And it's always for His glory. It's never for our glory. It is always for His glory, because God's plan for our lives is always more powerful than the prison that we find our life in. I'll take it a little bit deeper. Often God's plan will produce because of your prison. Let me give you an example. Compassion can be produced in prison. I wrote it in the book, so I won't go into all the details of it, but I've been through 3 back surgeries. The first one was fairly successful. I felt very, very good for about 10 years. I ended up in doing a second surgery after about 10 years. And to be the irony of that is when the doctor told me and talked to me about the surgery, he said, this surgery generally is good for about 10 years. So that's kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of interesting to me. And almost to the date, 10 years, I found myself needing a second surgery. Did the second surgery, it was not successful at all. I actually wound up in more pain after the second surgery. And it wasn't until the third surgery that God used a man by the name of Dr. Jones. He's no longer practicing today. He was an elderly man when he did this surgery, but he was a great surgeon. God led us right to the right surgeon at the right time, the right place. He was actually a doctor who operated on other doctors and athletes and so on and so forth. And so he was a top-notch surgeon of that particular area. And today I'm virtually pain-free. Well, what that experience produced in my life was those were huge at the time. There were huge obstacles and opposition in my life of functioning in a normally. At times I literally couldn't even walk. I didn't even have the ability to walk. I was almost losing the use of my legs. But it produced in me great compassion for people struggling and dealing with back pain. And so those obstacles, or that specific obstacle in my life, God used to produce a great sense of compassion for people who struggle with back pain. I'll give you one last example in regards to God's plan producing because of your prison. I mentioned it in our last video. I grew up in a very legalistic mindset. And if you didn't watch that video, you can go back to the previous video and watch some of the description of that. But that experience, that mindset in my life makes me very compassionate for people who struggle with legalism, not measuring up, not doing enough to please God, not doing enough to maintain or keep God pleased with you. And so that experience produced a great sense of compassion for people who struggle with legalism. So what am I saying in this? I think I wrote it this way in the book. Nothing goes to waste in God's plan. Nothing Nothing ever goes to waste in God's plan, because God always uses opposition to produce opportunity in our lives. Here's what I'm saying to you. God is going to work it out. Type it in the comments below. Say it out loud. Say it. I know it sounds silly to say it out loud because you're all by yourself, but say it. God is going to work it out in my life. That is His scandalous grace. It's scandalous because we want to take some credit for it, but God is going to work it out. And the reason He's going to work it out in your life is because when He works it out, He always gets the glory for the outcome of the opposition that you face in your life. So here's what I'm asking you to do. We started this in our last video, and I want to continue this. I want to give you an opportunity to respond, to communicate something to me and others who are watching. I've got 2 questions for you. I want you to write them in the comments below and then answer the questions. And again, I'm not asking you to divulge anything that you don't feel comfortable with. But number 1, write this down. What are some specific obstacles you are facing today? Because God is going to use those obstacles to produce opportunity in your life that is going to be a blessing to not only you, but it's going to be a blessing to someone else as well. And what you're facing, the obstacles that you may be facing right now and that you may write in the comments, chances are someone else is facing those same obstacles, or at the very least, obstacles that are similar in nature. And just say what those obstacles are. And then number 2, how might God be using your obstacles as opportunities to reveal His plan in your life? Now, maybe you're still in the heat of the opposition that you are in, or the opposition that is opposing you. So maybe you say, well, Johnny, I don't know. Well, do some level of speculation. If I'm dealing with deep-seated anger and resentment, maybe God is showing me how to really experience true forgiveness. Maybe He's going to produce in me the capacity to forgive someone that I thought I would never be able to forgive. So what might God be using your obstacles as opportunities? How might He be using those to reveal His plan in your life? Thank you so much for being with me today. If this video and other videos are helpful to you, comment, like in the descriptions below, share it with somebody, let somebody know about it. And don't forget to click the subscription button and then click the little bell so that you get notifications. Thank you so much. I love you, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.